can't. He's not talking. Anyway, so we are at the last kind of throes of the region of the Babylonian Empire under the reign of Belshazzar, who is the co-regent of the city of Babylon. Okay, with Nabonidus being the ruler of Babylon around this time. Okay, we've been zooming into Belshazzar's timeline since the dream and the vision occurred during the first year of the reign of Belshazzar, right? We will continue with that in chapter 8, by the way, because we fast forward into year 3. We'll talk about that when we get there in a couple of weeks. Actually, we're going to talk about chapter 8 too today, this morning as well. The last time we had discussed, we had been looking at the details of the beast and the vision that Daniel was given. We spent a lot of time going through that, looking at all of the details and working from the macro to the micro, the big details, and then we would zoom in to talk about more details, and then we would zoom in a little more to talk about a little bit more details, right? The macro was about essentially the lion, the bear, and the leopard, and the fourth beast. And then we would zoom in to talk about the details of the fourth beast, the attendee, the one that is standing by. Daniel is kind of asking this attendee questions. He wants to know the exact details of the fourth beast and what is this all about? And the one who is standing by gives him those details, right? And they correspond with essentially what he saw. So Daniel completes, we got to the end of the chapter of Daniel 7, and he completes the historical account of his vision that he had seen concerning Gentile history and the impact of the fourth beast, a king that will arise in that kingdom. The beast is represented as the kingdom. Daniel's told that by the attendee. The king will arise and the destructive impact he will have on the land itself. However, at an appointed time, this king will be destroyed, and the holy ones will be given the kingdom with the one who is like a human being or like a son of man that will reign over all of them forever, which is where we get the kingdom that will not end or will not be destroyed, will not be dispossessed or passed on to another. Now, there's a supplementary question that I'm curious about. We didn't really spend time talking about the three kings and their kingdoms, but we're going to talk about it for the next couple weeks because there's not much detail given about these kings in chapter 7. Let's talk about some of the information that's provided for us in chapter 7, and then I want to talk about why this is something I want to focus on. First, Daniel, that is the attendee that he's talking to, describes these beasts as 4 kings and kingdoms. This is found in verse 17. It says, these great beasts, actually I'll start at verse 15. As for me, Daniel, my spirit was distressed within me, and the visions in my mind kept alarming me. I approached one of those who were standing by and began asking him the exact meaning of all this. So he told me and made known to me the explanation and the interpretation of these things. These great beasts, which are 4 kings who will arise from the earth. That's it, right? We know who they are, and we know what position they have, right? They're people of great authority, kings, rulers that will arise from the lands that they are in. In verse 12, we find that these kingdoms will be taken away. In verse 12, it says, as for the rest of the beasts, after the fourth beast is described, As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but an extension of life was granted to them for an appointed period of time. This is the same details that these individuals are, these kings are allowed to live for an appointed period of time. That's all we've got. We don't have anything else about these three kings in this chapter. And yet, there are lots of individuals that seemingly have a lot to say about these particular kings and who they are and their respective kingdoms. Some of them we know, some of them are not. Now I have to issue a statement here, okay? You know, we get accused of being commentary bashers. We're not commentary bashers, okay? We love commentaries insofar as if they're useful. You know, we got to test everything, you know, be good Bereans. So we're going to look at a couple of comments, and I want to make some notations. John Gill, a theologian of old, he is since passed, long time ago. He writes concerning these three kings and what they are. He connects them actually with chapter 2 of Daniel. As for the lion, he said, that which rose up first, the kingdom of the Babylonians, as the Syriac version expresses it, or the Assyrian monarchy founded by Nimrod, increased by the Assyrians and brought to its height under Nebuchadnezzar by the Babylonians and Chaldeans. So John Gill is convinced that the lion that is found here in chapter 7 of Daniel represents the Babylonian kingdom. The bear, according to John Gill, represents Medo-Persia, another monarchy in which succeeded the former and rose up upon the ruins of it, the Medo-Persian monarchy, and so the Syriac version prefixed to this verse by way of explanation. Okay? Same thing with the leopard, another beast, another monarchy, succeeding the Persian monarchy, in which rose up on the ruins of that, Darius of the Persians being beaten by Alexander, king of Macedon. So these three kings, these three beasts, according to John Gill, is essentially the reflection of the Babylonian Empire, the Persian Medo Empire, and the Grecian Empire that arose in history. Your favorite commentator, well, I have to add him in here. You know what I'm saying? Good old Matthew Henry. Yeah, two first names. He said, don't trust anyone with two first names. He believes something very similar. Again, the lion, this is the Chaldean monarchy that was fierce, strong, and made the kings absolute. The lion had eagle's wings with which to fly upon the prey, denoting the wonderful speed that Nebuchadnezzar made in the conquest of his kingdoms. Now, I have a question to ask of you. We just looked at the details of the kings, right? In chapter 7, verse 17, and really verse 12, that's all we've got. Does the chapter mention any explanation of what the wings are? We couldn't find it. We went through the whole chapter. Yep, we didn't see any explanation of what the wings were. How about this? The bear. This was the Persian monarchy, less strong and generous than the former, but no less ravenous. How does he know that? This bear raised itself on one side against the lion and soon mastered it. Did it say that the bear raised itself up against the lion and mastered the lion from the text? I know it says that it was raised on one side, right? But it doesn't say that it was against the lion. It raised up one dominion, some read it, Persia and Media. How about the leopard? This was the Grecian monarchy founded by Alexander the Great. Active, crafty, cruel, like a leopard. Wait, a leopard is cruel? I know a leopard is fast, right? But cruel? I don't know about that. He had 4 wings of a fowl. The lion seems to have but 2 wings, but the leopard had 4. For though Nebuchadnezzar made great dispatch in his conquest, Alexander made much greater. Again, it is true that the leopard had 4 wings, but does the attendee who is talking to Daniel, does he explain to him what the wings are? I don't remember going through the text and finding out what those are. Like I said, we went through the entire chapter. How about this gentleman? He says that the line is this: almost all interpreters, conservative and critical, believe this line represents Neo-Babylonia. Huge winged lions guarded the gates of the royal Babylonian palaces. That is true. We've actually seen pictures of that at the royal palace. Before you walk into the city of Babylon, the gates had lions on them. But are those the lions that are being described by Daniel in chapter 7? Now, I don't know. It certainly doesn't say it in the text. How about the bear? The bear that Daniel saw appeared stronger on one side than the other. This probably reflects the superior strength of the Persian part of the Medo-Persian Empire. Okay? How about the leopard? Most conservative students have identified the third kingdom with Greece because Greece overthrew Medo-Persia. Okay? That's certainly true. But again, were we given the details of all of these things within chapter 7? It could be possible. I'm not saying that it may not be. I'm just saying that I'm asking questions here. Are these details that these individuals bringing up, can we find them in chapter 7? Can we find the explanation of the wings? Can we find the explanation of the 3 ribs that are in the mouth of the bear? Can we find the explanation of the 2 wings that the lion has? How about this particular commentary? Bridgeway says this: Babylon, the kingdom symbolized by the first beast, was proud, ruthless, and unconquerable at the beginning. But later its cruel power softened and it became more humane, because it was given a human mind or something like that. I mean, I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, Nebuchadnezzar certainly was pretty loco. I don't know if he softened up at the end of his days. I don't know if that's true. Anyway, how about the bear? Already eating one victim and getting ready to pounce on another symbolized the Medo-Persian Empire and its greedy conquest. Okay, we'll just move on. The third beast, leopard, pictured the swift conquest by Alexander the Great and the spread of the Greek Empire. So, obviously, again, we see the commonality of this explanation, which could be true. The issue that I'm having with is the details. Who's telling these people this? Where are they getting this from? How about this gentleman? I won't tell you who he is, but this gentleman says this about the 3 kings. He says this: a lion with eagle's wings symbolized King Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian Empire, which was swift on the battlefield. Where does it say that it symbolizes King Nebuchadnezzar? I don't think the attendee said anything like that. I mean, we know Nebuchadnezzar was a king. That's true. But Nebuchadnezzar's passed at this point. Let's see. The bear. Bear represented the Medo-Persian Empire, which was not as fleet-footed as a lion, but still just as ferocious. Now, this individual decided to tell us what the three ribs in the mouth of the bear are. The three ribs are the conquering of Babylon, Lydia, and Egypt by the Medo-Persian Empire. Well, certainly the Medo-Persian Empire did conquer these, but is that what the three ribs means? By the way, I looked at another commentator. Another commentator said that the three ribs were three other regions. There were three other regions. They weren't those. There were some other regions. One of them was like, I can't remember which one it was. I couldn't remember which one it was, but they weren't those though. Again, is that what the three ribs, the attendee who was telling Daniel this explanation, did he tell him that these three ribs represented three regions? Again, we went through the whole chapter. We even read in between the verses. The leopard, known for its cunningness and swiftiness, aptly represented in the Greek Empire. Oh boy. Although all these commentators and these people that we just read, there's even more than this. Okay, this is just a small sample size. Believe that these three kings are Babylonian, Persian, Media, and Grecian. I mean, you could look throughout the commentators of history, of church history, and find that just about all of them possibly agree with each other, although there is some variation of differences of the explanation of these kings. However, you know how we do here at Beth Haven. I think I have a different take. Oh, why do you guys do this? Why do you guys do this? Again, I hate to be this guy. I really do. I really hate to be this guy, but I have to ask these questions. I can't do it. I can't do it well. Okay. Please turn with me to Daniel chapter 2. Okay. Let's notice some things here. I want to run through this text. Daniel chapter 2. Okay. I want to read it. I'm going to read the whole thing. Okay. Not the whole chapter, but just the explanation, the image, and then the explanation. And then I want to ask some questions. Okay. Verse 31 of chapter 2. You, O king, were looking, and there was a single great statue. That statue, which was large and extraordinary and of extraordinary splendor, was standing in front of you, and its appearance was awesome. The head of the statue was made of fine gold, and the breast of its arms of silver, its belly and its thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You continued looking until the stone was cut without hands, and it struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay, and it crushed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, and the silver and gold were all crushed at the same time and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away so that not a trace of them was found. But the stone that was struck the statue became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. Verse 36. This was the dream. Now we will tell of its explanation before the king. You, O king, are the king of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, the strength, the glory, and whoever the sons of men dwell, or the beasts of the field, or the birds of the sky, he has given them into your hand, and he has caused you to rule over them all. You are the head of gold. After you, there will arise another kingdom inferior to you. Then another third kingdom of bronze, which will rule over all the earth. Then there will be a fourth kingdom as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron crushes and shatters all things. And so like iron breaks in all pieces, it will crush and break all these in pieces. And that you saw the feet and the toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it will be a divided kingdom, but it itself will have it the toughness of iron, inasmuch as you saw the iron mixed with common clay. As the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly of pottery, some of the kingdom will be strong, some of it will be brittle. And in that you saw the iron mixed in with the common clay. They will combine with one another in the clay, or in the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, even as iron does not combine with pottery. If you want to know, again, the explanation of this, we go through this in detail in chapter 2, of course, of Daniel. Okay? I want you to focus on a couple of things here. Notice that in chapter 2, we get the explanation of the description of the statue, and then we get specific details. For instance, the description of the head in Daniel 2:32, the specific details of the head in 37 and 38 is very specific. We don't have to argue what that is. Daniel tells Nebuchadnezzar what the head of gold is. It is you, right? Pretty clear. The descriptions of the chest and the arms and the specific details in 39. After you, Nebuchadnezzar is the marker. After you, there's another kingdom that will arise. Verse 39. We get the description of the belly and the thighs in verse 32. Then we get the specific details in verse 39. Same deal. The description of the legs of iron in verse 33. The specific details in verse 40. And then the descriptions of the feet, of course, in verse 33. And the descriptions of the feet in 41 to 43. They're all there. All there is, clear as crystal, right? In the text in chapter 2. We don't have to argue what these details are because Daniel tells them to Nebuchadnezzar, right? Let's turn to Daniel chapter 8. Now, I won't read this fully because we're going to go over it in the next several weeks. But I do want to mention some things here. I did the same thing here in Daniel 8. Notice here, we have the description of the ram in verses 3 and 4. It says, "Then I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, a ram which had 2 horns was standing in front of the canal." We got the specific details of this ram in verse 20. The ram you saw with the 2 horns represents the kings of Media and Persia. That's fantastic, right? We know exactly what this is because Daniel gives us the details. We've got the male goat in chapter 8, verses 7 and 8. "I saw him beside the ram," that is the goat, "and he was enraged at him, and he struck the ram and shattered his 2 horns, and the ram had no strength to withstand him. So he hurried him to the ground and trampled on him, and there was none to rescue him from his power. Then the male goat magnified himself exceedingly, but as soon as he was mighty, the large horn was broken, and in his place came up 4 conspicuous horns toward the 4 winds of heaven." Whoops. We know what that is because of verse 21. So we get the description and the details. Verse 21. The shaggy goat, that is the male goat here, represents the kingdom of Greece. And the large horn that is between them, it's between his eyes, is the first king. Right? We get the description of the male goat's horn in verse 6. Okay? And then we get the specific details of the male goat's horn in chapter 8, verse 21. Or verse 22, actually. Again, the broken horn and the 4 horns that arose in its place represents 4 kingdoms, which will arise from his nation, although not with his power. We get the description of the broken horn in verse 7. the specific details of the broken horn and the lakes too in verse 22. And then the description of the four horns in verse 8. I think I messed up there. Oh yeah, well, we get the descriptions of the four horns, and then we get the specific descriptions, and I think in 21 and following. That was a typo for me. Okay. Anyway, the point is that we don't have to go outside the text to know what these are. These details are in the text itself. Again, we're going to go through these in chapter 8 when we get there. But the point is that there's a description and then the specific details of what that is. Daniel has provided the specific details for Nebuchadnezzar, and he's provided descriptive and specific details here in chapter 8 of what these are. Okay? Now, let's go back to Daniel 7. Just the page over. So we have here, which we just read. Actually, let's go ahead and read. Let's go. I'm feeling a little froggy this morning. Let's go ahead and read chapter 7, verses 1 and following. Okay. It says, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions in his mind as he lay on his bed. And then he wrote the dream down and related the following summary of it. Daniel said, I was looking in my vision at night, and behold, the four winds of the four great beasts were coming up from the sea, different from one another. The first was a lion that had the wings of an eagle. I kept looking until its wings were plucked, and it was lifted from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a human mind was given to it. And behold, another beast, the second one, resembling a bear, and it was raised up on one side, and the 3 ribs were in its mouth and between its teeth, and thus they said it would arise, devour much meat. It was raised up on one side. It doesn't say that it raised itself on one side. Matthew Henry. Okay. I kept looking, and behold, another one like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird, and the beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. And after this I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, the 4th beast, dreadful and terrifying, extremely strong, and had 4 iron teeth, and it devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder with its feet. And it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. And while I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. And behold, the horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and the mouth uttering great boasts. Now, we just looked at in chapter 7 the three statements concerning the kings, right? We looked at it in verse 17 and in verse 12, right? We have the description of the lion in chapter 7, verse 4, but there's no specific details given of what the wings are. Why were they plucked? We have no idea. Why was he given a human mind? There's no specific details given by the attendee of the that Daniel is inquiring of this vision. We have the descriptions of the bear, verse 5. We just read it. But there's no specific details given, like in chapter 2 and in chapter 8. None. And of course, we have the descriptions of the leopard in verse 6, but there's no specific details of the leopard mentioned in chapter 7. They just mention that there are 3 kings and their dominion will be taken from them, but they will be spared. So here's a noteworthy question I have. We saw chapter 2, there's details there. We saw chapter 8, there's details there. We don't have to go outside to look for those. If the attendee who was standing by told Daniel the information that was important to know about the night vision, Daniel asked for exact details, okay? And the attendee gave him those details. If that is true, and it is, and the information given to Daniel does not include specific details about these creatures, why would anyone, we as the readers, presume that these things mean or represent something when there's not even an explanation given by the attendant? Let me say this again. If the attendant who is standing by told Daniel didn't just get a flash of genius. He asked somebody else that was there in the vision to tell him what this means, right? Tell me, give me the details of these things. And the attending who is standing by gives him all the information that is important to him to know concerning his question. Daniel does not include the specific details about these creatures. The attendee doesn't tell him this. Why would we or anyone else as the readers presume that these things mean or represent something when there's not even an explanation given by the attendant? So who or what are these three kings? I have a possible answer, and I will give you my explanation of why I believe this is. I believe these three kings are not the representation of these kingdoms. I don't think so. I am convinced that these three kings will be around prior to the rise of the conqueror, to the rise of the little horn. Why would I say this? Well, let's look at a verse, a particular statement that is found in Daniel chapter 7, verse 12. I believe that the language here fleshes this out. With the specifics of these three words in red, as for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away. Remember that word dominion is sultan, rule, okay, was taken away. But an extension of life was granted to them for an appointed period of time. Let's talk a little bit about this. The word rest is shelhar. This word occurs 12 times in the Hebrew scriptures, 4 times in the book of Daniel, and it corresponds with the Hebrew word that is spelled and pronounced the same way. And it means the same thing, actually. Okay? It underscores when an object or an image or a person or a people or any other thing remains or is left over from a collective. Okay? The rest of the beast is talking about the leopard, the bear, right? And the lion. He already explained the fourth beast. These are the rest. Okay? Again, it is translated rest or remaining. So the remaining of these beasts or the rest of these beasts, their dominion or their sultan was taken away from them. But an extension of life was granted to them. The word is al-kal. That's the Aramaic phrase. It only occurs 2 times in the scriptures, and it only occurs here in the book of Daniel. It can be translated as lengthening or prolonging. It essentially underscores a continuance and lengthening of time, an extension or period of time. So the rest of the remaining of these beasts, which are referred to as kings, okay, receive a prolonging or a continuance of life. Kahi is the Aramaic phrase here. It occurs 7 times in the scriptures, 6 times in Daniel, 1 in Ezra. It corresponds with the Aramaic word chaya, which is translated live or life. Okay? Now, we don't have to go very far to look at this word. Every time that this word is used in Daniel, between chapters 2 and 7, it refers to a human being's physical life or a being's existence, such as God's. For example, in Daniel chapter 2, verse 30, this word is used. It says, but as for me, that is Daniel talking to Nebuchadnezzar, he says, but as for me, this mystery has not been revealed to me, for any wisdom residing in me more than any other living man or living person. Okay? He's talking about those that are alive. But for the purpose of making the explanation known to the king, and that you may understand the thoughts in your mind or of your mind. In Daniel chapter 4, verse 17, Nebuchadnezzar's testimony concerning his experience with encountering the God of the heavens says this sentence, this is Daniel again talking to Nebuchadnezzar. This sentence is by the decree of the angelic watchers, and the decision is a command of the holy ones in order that the living may know, those who are alive, who have physical life, that the living may know that the Most High is ruler over the realm of humankind. This is the same word here that's found in chapter 7, verse 12 of Daniel. The extension of life. In chapter 4, verse 34, same chapter, different statement, different verse. Nebuchadnezzar says this concerning God. But at the end of that period, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes towards heaven, and my reason returned to me, and I blessed the Most High and praised and honored him who lives forever. Remember, we talked about this, that this was an amazing statement of Nebuchadnezzar, because this was a slap in the face to Marduk, who he was convinced was the God, was the sole premier God of not only Babylon, but all the regions that rule the world itself. We went through the Enuma Elish. Remember that? That document that he read every year? That he's contrasting that God is the living God. He's the only one that is living, whereas Marduk does not live. Daniel chapter 6, verse 20. When he had come near to the den to Daniel, he cried out in a troubled voice. This is Darius the Mede. The king spoke and said to Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you constantly serve, been able to deliver you from the lions? That is the same word that's used here in Daniel 7 concerning God. And the last, Daniel chapter 6, verse 26, I make a decree that in all the dominion of my kingdom, men are to fear and tremble before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and enduring forever, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed, and his dominion will be forever. Again, same kind of statement that Darius writes concerning God, who again is alive, in contrast to these deities that do not live and do not exist. Daniel chapter 7, verse 12, back again. Recall that the dominion, that is the Sultan, was removed or taken away from these kings. I believe this is not an extension of the kingdoms, but this is an extension of these kings' lives. It is not talking about the kingdom's life and how it exists. It is talking about the kings and their physical life being prolonged. It was granted to them for an appointed period of time. The physical life of the kings, not their kingdoms. I believe their kingdoms are going to be taken away by the one with the little horn. I believe from what we've studied, this whole text, I believe, is all eschatology. All of it. All of it. All of it. Daniel is not recounting the history of kingdoms. He's already done that in Aramaic with chapter 2 with Nebuchadnezzar. It's already written in the annals of the kings. It's already written there. They already got that history. This is talking about the period of the rise of the little horn and his impact and influence over lands and kingdoms and kings. So to sum up, it would seem based upon the language, considering the historical and cultural implications. Remember, Daniel is writing this in Aramaic. This is the main language of the world at the particular time. This is written to the Gentiles mostly. Okay. We'll get to chapter 8 and we'll see the difference between, I believe, the audience that Daniel is addressing based upon some of the language that he uses, particularly the Hebrew. Okay. It was seen based upon the historical and cultural implications of this vision. These beasts, that is, these kings, all arise in concert or concurrently together, at least in sequence. And the little horn, who becomes the main ruler, seems to dispose these three other kings, but their physical life is preserved. Why, I don't know. Maybe perhaps to give credence to him. I have no idea. But all of these kings arise around relatively at the same time. So if this is true, if I'm throwing this out here, there's another question we need to ask. Why do commentators explain these three kings and the respective kingdoms in this manner? Why do they take this text and add those details to represent Babylonia, Medo-Persia, and Greece? We will talk about that next week. Okay. Let's go ahead and pray, and we will close this out here. Lord, your word is clear. We just need to read it and believe it. I thank you, Lord, so much that we don't have to necessarily add anything to your text that isn't there to make it more clear, but just read what's there and ponder that. I thank you, Lord, so much for the clarity, just the clarity of your word, and how we can continue to talk about these things, discuss these things, and use your word as the base of our understanding. May we continue to do so now and always. For it's in your son's name. Amen.